in Ulster there are 3 linguistic groups that contribute to the traditional patterns of speech today, which includes Irish Gaelic, Ulster Scots and Northern Hiberno English. Hiberno English is often referred to as Irish English as well. These native forms of speech were a central aspect of the Ulster Folk Museum since its formation in 1964 and even before then. So there's about 9 different collections, and starting with Huddleston, so Robert Huddleston. His material is all handwritten. He was a farmer, a gunsmith and a poet, and he was born in Moneyrea in County Down. I think there's over 1,000 documents here that have been catalogued. He wrote in the vernacular speech and he commented on what was going on at the time and social commentary. This poem here is quite a sad poem. It's about his daughter who died when she was 9. It's called Mary on the Brain. I looked up her death cert actually, and it said that she died of water on the brain. So I'm not too sure whether he was trying to refer whether he had her on the brain, but also how she died as well. There's so many documents here, manuscripts of his, all handwritten. There's such richness in all of his material, and it is fascinating. There's so much of it now that it's kind of hard to even pick out which ones are the best. He kind of wrote sometimes on scraps of paper. Here he was writing on I know his writing is one way, but the stamp is there from a tea and coffee dealer in Belfast. So any scrap of paper would do, That's the oldest material we would have here, because it would have been written around the 1850s. It goes back so far as well, and that he's talking about people who lived through the 1798 rebellion, so it is very interesting. One of the other collections we have here is of Sir John Byres, and he was an obstetrician, a medical academic and folklorist, so he had quite an interesting background. What he used to do was he would record the words and phrases that his patients used in his practice, and he would write them down. He did a lot of word lists and phrases and sayings. His handwriting is quite hard to read. The word futar, I think they've come across this in most of the glossaries. He has futar, and again here, it's so hard to read it, but a useless person, a clumsy worker. He would have been writing maybe about the 1900s, early 1900s, 1910, maybe that era. He knew another medical doctor called Robert Moore. He was a medical doctor based in Bangor. And similarly to what Byres was doing, he used to collect the words of his patients and write them down. He kind of wrote on all sorts of books. As you can see, this is like an accounting book. At this section here, he talks about, he has fisherman's words. So again, they're all words that just fishermen, I guess, would use. Cockabillions is a small shellfish of the Scallop Society. He has the word futar here as well, to fumble, or one who takes a long time over a job or does not do it well or properly. So they seem to all have futar here. We have about 8 items belonging to him here. They're mostly glossaries, and also he has some riddles and rhymes there too. This collection here then, these are 2 manuscripts by W.F. Marshall, and he was from 6 Mile Cross in County Tyrone. He was again collecting words in the hope of creating a dictionary, I guess, as well. But he has written in red here the source material of these words. It's quite detailed, and it's very, very neat as well. As you can see, there's a lot of damage to it because it was believed that his dog had attacked it. And some of the pieces are actually kept inside here as well. Another part of the collection here is that of Robert Gregg. He was a professor of linguistics in the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, but he came from Gleno near Larne in County Antrim. So he was always hugely interested in Ulster dialect, and he has done a massive amount of academic work on Ulster dialect. This is a sample of one of his off-prints, Scotch-Irish. He referred to it in the early years, Ulster Scots, he called it Scotch-Irish. We have some of his off-prints, we have some glossaries of his. He collaborated with Brendan Adams, the dialect archivist here, in regular correspondence and letters. He was really an expert in the area of linguistics concerning Ulster dialect. When he passed away in 1998, the staff that worked here created this volume dedicated to him. It just goes to show you how influential he was. I think this is quite interesting. This is one of the maps that he did which outlined the areas of Ulster Scots within the north of Ireland. So these grey areas here was where the most Ulster Scots dialect was. And then you had Irish, of course, and then you had the Hiberno English then in certain areas. So he has gotten his collection of words here as well, and his collection, I believe, was donated by his widow, not shortly after he passed away. The bulk of the collection is that of Brendan Adams. His first name was actually George, but he went by his second name, Brendan. He would have signed everything as GB Adams. He was the dialect archivist here from 1964 up until he died in 1981. The majority of the material here is his correspondence, his letters. He was an absolute genius in this area. He had such knowledge of about, I think, 22 languages. Some of them even extinct languages, he had knowledge of them. He was fluent in Irish, in French and in German, and I think he was semi-fluent in Italian and Czech. If they were an Irish person and they spoke Irish, he would write to them in Irish as opposed to just writing in English. And it's the same with the French people. He knew he would write to them in French. This is in Irish, and I think he's referring to Hollywood. He's talking about the history of Hollywood with a friend of his. And then this is in Scottish Gaelic. I think he was writing to the Scottish Gaelic promoters or organisation that promotes Scottish Gaelic. I believe this letter is in Danish. This one is in French. We have one in Dutch to the same man. He's one in French and one in Dutch. This is German, and this is Swedish. He had drawn many maps as well, linguistic maps, to try and, I suppose, display the language distribution of whether it was Irish or Ulster Scots, and they're within the stacks here in the back. So these were all the linguistic maps. This is beautiful, really. It's so neat, and again, he liked to kind of talk about the origins of languages and stuff. The world's languages here. It's quite impressive stuff here. Then you have, there's so much material in here. This is to do with the questionnaire and the responses from the people that contributed, whether they said they were going up to Belfast or down to Belfast, or up to Dublin or down to Dublin, so things like that. Here he's looking at Irish language in Mid-Ulster, and he uses the census a lot as well for information and trying to gather the development of Irish speech as well in the north of Ireland. Yeah, so there's loads of stuff there, and again, that's all to do with the questionnaires that would have been sent out to different regions as well. But he just seemed like such an interesting person.